All right, you are still watching New Dawn, the Wednesday edition, and right here on the set this morning, I have someone in the house who, well, we would want to find out the mode of transportation that brought him here. Right. But we will do that very shortly. He's the Honorable Commissioner for Transportation in Ogun State, Engineer Gbenga Dairo. Engineer Dairo, we want to welcome you to New Dawn.
Good morning, thank you for inviting me.
All right, we want to be looking at the multimodal transportation plan of the Ogun State government. And we want to kind of extray what actually is in the pipeline, what are the dimensions of this multimodal transportation plan, and what does the plan actually look like before we now come to the success story. But maybe we'll begin from here. How were we before? That is, what is bringing this transportation plan? Why a transportation plan? And then, well, okay, let's take that first.
Okay. All right, thanks for the opportunity to meet the people of Ogun State. The beginning of this administration led by workaholic governor, as was referred to yesterday, Prince Dr. Abeokuta, there was an important recognition that the economy of our state, their state, is unlikely to reach the heights that he expected without significant investment in transportation. I don't think I need to explain to everyone the importance of transportation, because whatever business you want to conduct, whether it's your personal business or going to work or even going to school, going to the market or whatever it is, the activity you want to undertake, transportation always features in there. And the efficiency and effectiveness of transportation is accepted and is known as critical and important to economic development and activities. So he therefore decided that at that stage that a ministry needed to be established, because prior to him coming into office there was no Ministry of Transportation. And as soon as the ministry was established and I was appointed as the Honorable Commissioner for Transportation, one of the first tasks he gave to us as the ministry and to me personally was for us to develop a strategic transport master plan for Ogun State. And we embarked on that assignment with vigor. He was clear in his mind that he expected a multimodal transportation system for Ogun State. And by multimodal, we mean we're looking at a transportation system that provides options to the citizens of Ogun State, provides options to visitors, transportation options to visitors to Ogun State, transportation options to those who work and live in our state. So the option of traveling by road will be there, or option of traveling by air will be there for those who are coming from outside the country or outside the region or outside the state. The opportunity and the option of rail transportation or even water transportation also will be there. And he's also looking at intermodal transportation so that you can take a part of your journey by road, change over to railway and to something else to arrive at your destination, safe and sound. Another critical dimension of his vision for transportation, of course, in our state is for it to be affordable to all the citizenry. And for us to move away from the informal transport operations that seems to dominate, not just seems, in fact, that dominates transportation in Ogun State and in Nigeria as a whole, especially as it concerns motorcycle taxis, tricycles, and so on. To move away from informal transportation to formal, safe, affordable, comfortable, high-quality transportation services across the length and breadth of Ogun State. And that's what the strategic transportation master plan we have for Ogun State speaks to. But it also recognizes the fact that as we speak today, the vast majority of our people move around by road transportation, which is why prior to this administration, we will have observed that the quality of our road system across the state was nothing to be, it wasn't desirable. And since the advent of this administration, as of today, some 400 kilometers of road rehabilitation, road reconstruction interventions have taken place across the 20 local governments within Ogun State. And that's, you're asking what it was before and where we are today. So in road transportation, there are certain things we are doing. We're also looking at other modes of transportation, in particular railway and the airport, and we can talk about that in some more detail as we go along. Just to educate members of the public generally, as far as transportation is concerned, the sector we dimension it in 4 areas, and in all these 4 areas, this administration has been intervening. One is infrastructure, and I've spoken already about the effort that has been put into rehabilitating and reconstructing roads. Another is operations itself, operating services. And those in Abeokuta will have observed that we have a pilot bus scheme already operating in Abeokuta between Adato and Itaoshi as a demonstration of the kind of quality bus services that the administration expects to see, not only in Abeokuta, but across all of our cities and indeed even rural areas within Ogun State. The third dimension, of course, is the regulatory aspects of transportation. And the Ministry of Transportation itself has a primary duty responsibility to regulate the transport sector. We're working hard at doing that. I spoke earlier in this conversation that the reform of the informal sector is high in the list of priorities of the administration and a feature of the Transportation Master Plan itself, that we migrate away from dependency on motorcycle taxis and tricycle taxis to more convenient, affordable, safe, and modern public transport systems.
Now, okay. I recall in April when the Transportation Master Plan was unveiled, and that saw the launching of about 57 the internet-enabled SITA buses.
Correct.
And it was said that it would be extended to other parts of the state.
Yes.
How far have you gone?
Well, the project that was launched in April was a pilot scheme, pilot or a demonstration scheme. Pilot means that we are not simply going into starting a program without understanding the nitty-gritty that actually would speak to the success of such a scheme. So on paper, we had an idea of what we need to do, but we need to put it into practice, to engage with passengers, members of the public, operators, both private and informal operators, to see exactly how such a scheme will work within the peculiarities of Abeokuta, within the peculiarities of Ogun State. So the idea is not simply to bring in schemes that have worked overseas or even in Lagos, and then to simply impose it on Abeokuta and Ogun State, believing that it will work. So in the past few months, we've been doing that, and we've recorded a lot of successes. We've collected data, information, feedback from members of the public that will now inform the expansion and the rollout of this scheme, first and foremost across our capital city here in Abeokuta, and then other similar cities or other cities in Ogun State, before we extend these services into the smaller rural areas in our state.
Okay, Mr. Commissioner, trying to look back at bus mass transit in Ogun State, I think that was the time we had the Gateway Transit, which ran, I think it was in the late 80s or early 90s or thereabouts. And within the few time that you've done this pilot scheme, do you see a feasibility of a possibility? Do you see the possibility of a success story?
Of course. I mean, it's bound to succeed because at the highest level of government, and by that I mean the governor of the state, there is commitment to investments in safe, affordable public transportation systems across the land. The way the world is going today is to pivot away from private transportation to public transportation. Of course, there are climate change issues involved. It's a lot more efficient use of infrastructure when you have groups of people carpooling, vehicle pooling on bus systems, utilizing the little infrastructure that we have available for road transportation, for example. We have seen that the federal government has invested heavily in rail transportation between Lagos and Ibadan. The substantial part of that investment is in fact within Ogun State. It will be silly of us not to take advantage of such investment within our state, and so a lot of the hard work has been done. So all we need to do is piggyback on what the federal authorities have done in our state to take advantage of it. The people of Ogun State, or the way the governor sees the people of Ogun State, clearly he says he's a governor for all peoples of Ogun State. A lot of us are exposed to public transport systems outside the country. We are familiar with the use of public transportation by everyone, irrespective of class or status in society. And it's the same principle that is essentially brings to Ogun State. We want a system that is comfortable for all of us. Nobody here in our state, in this administration, is happy seeing people in Ogun State confined or having no option but to use Okadas, for example, as a mode of transportation. It's not a modern way of moving people. It's not a safe way of moving people. So the vision looks beyond our current experience and is saying that, look, we want something that I can use, that the governor himself can use, that his family members can use, that you can use, that white-collar people can use, blue-collar people can use, and it's affordable to each and every one of us. That is the vision. But it's going to require us to take a number of steps for us to get there. And the first step was for us to articulate this vision into a plan, which is what we have done, to demonstrate the possibilities, which we have done in Abeokuta, to take advantage of some of the projects that other authorities like Lagos State, like the federal government are doing in our state, to piggyback on that, to bring new dimension to public transport here in our state. The Abeokuta airport, of course, is one that we're all familiar with.
No, we'll still come to the cargo. We'll still come to the cargo, but we just want to
still on road transportation.
Yeah.
You said pilot scheme is ongoing.
Correct.
So when is the next phase coming up?
Well, as we speak, we are already planning the introduction of connector scheme between Ladering, Wole Soyinka railway station at Ladering to the center of town. That is likely to be the next phase of the pilot scheme, because now we experience that a lot of people in Abeokuta are migrating to Lagos using Ladering as a railway station, and of course there are people from other parts of the country also arriving in our state capital, using Wole Soyinka station. So we're going to connect that into the center of town. Those who have been using our services have asked for routes to other parts of Abeokuta. I won't want to give you a date today, but suffice to know that we have rolling stock available. Some of the challenges we have faced during this pilot phase, by the way, has been the excessive, significant increase in diesel fuel costs. In April, when we launched the scheme, I think the operator of the scheme at that time was probably paying something like 300 naira per liter. Today it's almost 800. That's changing dynamics, I beg your pardon. But His Excellency has now entered into, on behalf of the state, has entered into an agreement, a relationship with investors who are now working with the states to convert these vehicles to CNG fuel gas use. A lot cheaper, cleaner, speaks to the climate change issues, less expensive, and therefore like to be a bit more affordable to people of Ogun State. So we're working on that at the moment to convert all this rolling stock we have in our possession to CNG fuel use, compressed natural gas use, which is cheaper, accessible, available, and as I said, cleaner as well. So the rollout is dependent upon the timing of that conversion, because as it stands today, the cost of diesel fuel, I think, is making it prohibitive to operate on that.
Now in the course of your discussion, because of what you were saying now, is it going to be a public-private
partnership? It is a public-private partnership because our operators are private sector people who have experience and a track record of operating mass transit systems. and they've done it in other jurisdictions in Nigeria, in Lagos, in the northern parts of the country, and so on. So they have the experience. So that's the private sector are bringing in management experience, management expertise, customer management track records, while the public sector or the government, we are facilitating. So part of the public sector involvement is that we provide excellent roads infrastructure, we provide bus station infrastructure, bus stops, road signs, road markings that are necessary, and ensure the environment that the bus is operating is safe for passengers as well as for other road users. So it's a PPP arrangement.
Okay. But are there going to be maybe smaller buses or taxis? Because at times people prefer a quick mode of transportation. You want to go to Okilewo, just get a bike, and then in no traffic anyway. They know how to bypass the traffic situation and all that. So, but we're talking about luxury buses now, in which it could take time, for it to get filled up. So at the time people want to get to their destination a lot quicker. So are there going to be small buses, taxis, complementing this?
Good question. For those of us who are in the transport field, taxis are premium services. I don't know whether you understand what I mean by that. A taxi, ordinarily a taxi is a smaller vehicle, occupies about it takes about 4 people. So you're undertaking a journey from one point to the other, 4 people in a vehicle. Compare that to a vehicle that may be accommodating about 30 people. So 30 people are paying the cost of transporting from one area to the other. But if you use a taxi, there's only 4 of you, so it's bound to be a bit more expensive. Okay. All right? So taxis have always been and will always be a part of the transport system, but it's a premium service, and it should be seen as such. The quality of taxis we see in Abeokuta and parts of Ogun State today is not, does not speak to the vision of this administration for public transportation. Some of those vehicles.
Yeah, I think what we're seeing on the screen now, some of those buses, and then we've even seen the bus stops very shortly, just before we saw those, and okay.
I think these are
models.
These are the animation. Okay, these are real pictures.
This is
at that time, yes. So I mean, the concept of this kind of infrastructure, I don't know, for one reason or the other, is relatively new in Ogun State, and we need to take our people along so that they understand.
That was the question I wanted to ask you. About the lethargy. I remember. When in those days, there used to be a bus, by the Kuto roundabout that was to take workers, down to the secretariat. And you find out that some of these workers will leave the buses and be waiting for taxis, or even some of their friends or some of their bosses who have cars. And how much is even the bus fare? It's not something that's so outrageous, but so how do you combat that lethargy? How do you combat that, where we're coming from, to now embrace this and see it as something that, I can get inside this and be proud?
Well, I mean, public transportation, mass transit is a service. Okay. And every individual has a right to determine the choice that he makes for transportation. All right. So if I prefer that a colleague takes me to work, I don't think there's anything wrong in that at all. Okay. If I prefer to go by taxi, there's nothing wrong in that. The idea behind multimodal transportation systems is for there to be various options for people depending on your circumstances, the situation you find yourself in. The situation you describe, what I may comment on that about is that our traffic rules and regulations often are not complied with. Okay. So at Kuto today, you find that on the highway, which has been, a lot of investment has gone into giving us decent infrastructure. You see people waiting there, queuing there, conducting illegal activities. That is wrong. Okay. It's unsafe. it inspires congestion in those areas, and oftentimes also damages the infrastructure as well. But so we have to do, and as I said at the beginning of this program, that part of the work we do in the ministry is for us to regulate the sector.
Yeah.
So we're going to have to step up our activities in that area to ensure that it is not just easy for anybody to simply park on the road and start collecting passengers. But that's what makes that option perhaps attractive in contrast to using a formal bus stop and a formal bus mass transit system. So the regulatory aspects are usually designed to influence the behavior of people. So that you understand that if you use this system, either a normal bus system or you want to go and take a kabu of sorts, there are some prices associated or costs associated with it. You then have to weigh all those in your mind to decide which is best for you. So these days, in Lagos as an example, they introduced some new laws banning Okada riders in certain local governments. We're not there yet. But the point I want to make is that in Lagos, not only is the Okada rider driver or motorcyclist penalized, but the passenger is also penalized. And that's to incentivize people that understand that, look, you also have a duty to ensure that whatever mode of transportation you use is compliant with expected rules and regulations. And that's a demonstration, an example of the regulatory aspects of transportation planning. So here in Ogun State, we're heading in that direction.
Okay. Okay. Well, with the ban of Okada in some local governments in Lagos, that has led to the influx of Okada riders, into Ogun State, and we have many of them. So, but how are you also trying to checkmate the activities, or is there a plan in the offing to also ban Okada in Ogun State?
Or let me put it this way: does government have the will to take that bull? Does your ministry have the will to take that bull by the horn and do what is?
Yeah, the Okada, or I prefer to call them motorcycle taxes.
Motorcycle taxes, okay.
Because interestingly, there is nothing wrong in motorcycle taxes. And there are several jurisdictions across the world where motorcycles are used for taxes. The best example in Africa is in Rwanda. And it's a decent service that they offer there. But if you go into the Eastern Asian countries, Vietnam, Cambodia, and so on, you also find them there. So motorcycle taxes affect all of us in three areas. One is safety, the other is security, and the issue of revenue collection, or the revenue they contribute to the state treasury. To go back to your question, the government has the will to intervene whenever it wishes to intervene, or this administration has the will to intervene, okay, as necessary. Okay? But what we see with motorcycle taxes today is that, given where we are in the implementation of our Transport Master Plan, the motorcycle taxes are currently offering a service. Okay? That if that service is not there, then it's going to create some challenges to some transport users.
So you allow it as a stopgap?
No, I didn't say so. I'm still painting the current picture.
Okay.
The current picture is that they offer a particular service, particularly into areas where we may regard as inaccessible. And until our road infrastructure program catches up, it appears that it's only those kinds of services that can deliver people to their destinations. The fact also remains that motorcycle operators also are engaged in economic activity. Okay? So there are people whose livelihood depend upon it. And there are families, in fact, whose livelihood also depend upon it. And so for government to take an action on it is not simply a transportation issue. There's a transportation dimension, as I said, as regards safety, the affordability of those services. There is also the economic dimension, okay, to livelihoods of people whose existence depends on the income generated in this particular sector. There's a security dimension to Okada operations. And in that area, I'm happy to say that we've been working closely with the security agencies to find a way to register each and every Okada operator within the jurisdiction of Ogun State. So we know who is operating here, we know who comes in afresh, we know those who come in afresh who will then be challenged that they must comply with our own rules and regulations if they wish to continue in this subsector within our state. And of course, as I said, also there's a revenue generation aspect to it, to the activities. But the will of government is there to intervene, and as soon as the options, credible options are available, as there are in parts of Lagos, which is why they now have the opportunity to shut down the operations in certain local governments. We'll get there soon. In Abeokuta, the capital city, which will showcase what it is we want to do across Ogun State. As a capital city, we want to create a transport system that is befitting.
We're talking about.
No, let me just, Moses, just a minute. But that act, you know, because now when you look at the scenario here, you will find out that not only this government, but previous administrations actually, there was a time they had to enforce the use of helmets, they had to do all of that, but you find out that it looks like, you know, the motorcycle community is like they've taken the entire scenario by storm. That makes it so, because you look at administration after administration and then you are asking yourself, is it really possible? Even Lagos now, you still find out that, okay, it's just in some local government that the ban is total. They still find a way around it. Is it really possible for, you know, or is it that they've become so powerful, you know, that government can't handle them?
Yeah, I mean, there's a general problem in our society. And that problem is that, this is my own personal opinion, that the degree of lawlessness in our society has gone beyond what the enforcement agencies can handle. Enforcement works very well where only a small proportion of people are breaking rules and regulations. Where you have a situation where the vast majority are, especially in a democracy, where the vast majority of people decide that this is how we want to conduct ourselves, enforcement becomes extremely difficult. Very, very difficult. Because democracy, as I'm sure you know, is a game of numbers. So if the vast majority of people decide and determine that, look, we want to operate in a way that is, you know, we want to live our own rules and regulations. You know, whether any political leader has to listen to what those people are saying because they're in large numbers. Now, the duty of leaders and the government in such circumstances is to begin to provide alternatives and options that allows people to migrate in their own interest. They can, so once you have an option and you look at A and B, you will tell yourself that it is your own interest to move in this particular direction. And then you get the majority of people to migrate into the formal system as you want them to engage in. And then the small number who remain breaking rules and regulations, then enforcement can be effective. But even given that, as it may be here in Ogun State now, we, together with the union leaders themselves and the security teams, the union operatives have embarked upon a rider registration system. And they've been doing that now for the past 8-9 months or thereabouts. So that if we have information and data on those who are actually involved in this business, then it's easier for us to identify those whom we want to penalize when the opportunity is there for us to penalize them. As you know, Okada riders are very fleeting. They're here today, gone tomorrow. So able to track them down is very difficult. So without information and data, it will be extremely difficult for enforcement agencies to actually undertake or carry out their functions. So that process is ongoing. It's not an easy process, it's a difficult process, but still ongoing nevertheless. And we hope that once it's successfully concluded, it will improve and increase the ability of our enforcement teams to take action against those who refuse to wear the helmets or drive against one-way traffic and so on and so forth.
Okay, I think another challenge also taxi drivers that convey two passengers in front seats. Some even convey four passengers, in back seats. So, are you also looking into this?
Well, we're looking at the generality of compliance with traffic rules and regulations. Not only taxi drivers, private car drivers do exactly the same. Truck drivers are a particular pandemic in our state at the minute. So there are various areas of compliance with traffic rules and regulations that is of concern to us. So usually in the management of safety, which is basically what you're asking speaks to, we're always concerned about behavior of drivers, quality of our vehicles, the infrastructure and the support systems even us as government provides to guide the behavior of road users. So all these three aspects are within the focus of our administration, but things have to be done gradually. So I will want to identify taxi operators only as the culprits. There are several culprits in the road space we have across our state at the moment. You will have observed that several vehicles, the number plates are not legible. Truck drivers are speeding around this particular axis where your station is a particular area of difficulty. So there are issues all over, but we have to take each particular matter step by step.
Now, is there an education unit, a kind of orientation? Because, when they had the burial for the Queen, and, I watched the convoy, you find out that even the long stretch, people didn't break onto the street. I don't know whether people didn't break onto the street, and I began to look from that point at our own mindset here. If it was the press at one particular point, some people will break those barriers, and then they will get to even some will be running after the vehicle. But so our own environment here, do you incorporate education and orientation or something within that modal plan?
I don't know. Thanks for raising the issue. I lived in the UK for 20 years, so I know how UK operates very well. And it's, the issue of the UK is, and I've mentioned it a bit earlier now, it's about law and order. Yeah. It's a country's, every foundation, the foundation of every institution, every action activity, citizens, institutions are all based on law and order. And you find that only a few people, there'll be one or two people, in spite of what you observe, there'll be one or two people who will break through that barrier, but immediately they will be dealt with and attended to. The vast majority of people behind the barriers, if you try to make an impression, even they will intervene and say, look, what are you up to? Whereas that may not be the case here. That is not the case here. So at some point, as society, we need to move and migrate into a place where we are ready to comport ourselves and follow the guidelines of constitutional authority. But the other thing about UK is that there's a huge investment in education, public consultations, education, and information, as they call it. Huge investments. My colleagues here from the Ministry of Information who are joining me will tell you about my discussions with them at all times about the need for significant investment in it. Because a lot of the actions of people are usually based on lack of education and ignorance, not even willful behavior. People behave in a way that you might find odd, but only because of ignorance and lack of information or education. So it requires a huge amount of investment in that area. So for those of you who are involved in the communications industry, I think you are the ones who should be making the case. And also be ensuring that the investment required in educating members of the public.
But when you
across all boards, not only transportation.
But Commissioner, at times it could be easier to regulate them through their unions. The Akumara, the AURTW, has been your relationship with the different unions of these transport workers?
That's an interesting question. The unions and the leaders have enormous influence on operators. There's no doubt about that. And oftentimes we've been engaging with them to ensure that they understand our own intentions, plans, and vision for them, and that they will be able to convey them to their members. Now, and it's all about, I'm glad you raised the issue of information education and communications, because I remember at my time when I was in Lagos, and at that time we were about to introduce BRT, Bus Rapid Transit. All right. Just as I'm doing now, we went on TV, we spoke to people, we did presentations, we called the unions, we called every strata of society. In fact, I used to have a friend then who was a High Court judge. I found it very difficult even to explain to him what we were trying to do. Okay? So basically, you're trying to bring a new concept to a population that basically are not able to envision what it is you're talking about. So eventually, at some point, we took our union leaders in Lagos, then we took them to France, we went to UK, we went to Colombia, we went to Brazil. Basically, we showed them what it is that we are talking about. And at some point, the same thing is going to happen here in the States. Okay? So that people actually understand and they see and they know exactly the expectation, what it is we're trying to achieve. Because when you see with your eyes, okay, you are far better informed, far better educated, but when you are hearing things, especially from someone like myself who may have some difficulty in breaking it down in the vernacular language that people understand, then it's difficult to communicate. So communication is essential, critical, very, very important. Now, it must not be underestimated at all.
Let me, before I go to air, the cargo, this education thing, it's not really, I found out that it might not necessarily mean university education.
No, not at all.
I've seen people who you think should know run against a red light.
No.
So those challenges are there, and you are saying, are you crazy? Don't you understand that the moment this light turns green here, is creating another, it's releasing another person, another set of people. So once you move, you think you are smart, you break the red light, you're going to create a death trap for yourself. So
I think we need to qualify what I meant by education. Education is not degree qualification, your school certificate, what have you, or your HND. That is not what we mean by education at all. Education is for you to be informed. To have superior quality information that influences your decision making, that allows you to make informed decisions, to understand what is going on. So when I mention education, it has nothing whatsoever to do with academic education at all. So you can educate in vernacular, in Yoruba, in Pidgin English, in whatever languages you choose to, insofar as you are communicating and you are passing and conveying information to whoever it is that is listening to you. That's what I meant by education. It's nothing to do with academic qualification at all.
Now, cargo.
Yeah. Well, Tuji, please, before you get to that point, I could recall that in July, Lagos State and Ogun State government signed an MOU on a 31-kilometer red line rail service from Oyingbo in Lagos to Agbado, here in Ogun State.
Correct.
Can you tell us more about that?
Yes. Again, this is another of the multimodal intervention of the administration. Transportation system in Ogun State, by the way, I think is characterized by three or four categories. So we have cities like Abeokuta, and it has its peculiarities. We have rural areas in Ogun State. They have their own transportation needs and requirements. But we also have some parts of Ogun State that are pretty close to Lagos State. Okay? And those places are more or less, in fact, people who reside in those places more or less see themselves as Lagosians sometimes. And there are those in Lagos who see themselves as people in Ogun State, which is what inspired the governors of both states, Lagos and Ogun, to enter into the Lagos-Ogun Joint Development Commission, MOU, which was signed, I think it was last year or thereabouts. And that speaks to the need that transportation across both states, security about both states, planning, urban planning across both states should be jointly done, because those areas now are more or less one. Particularly those areas, as I said, are bound Ogun State and Lagos. So, but the one you are referring to, Lagos State is now developing a red line scheme between Onyigbo and its boundary Iju, but we'll be able to persuade them to extend it into Agbado. The red line itself is a Lagos scheme that will eventually terminate at Marina. All right. Right now, even before the start of the red line, the National Railway Corporation have always been running about 4 services between Agbado and Butemeta Junction. I don't know whether you're aware of that. That service has always served the people of Agbado, the people of Ijoko and Ota, and the people of Ifo. They are the major people that constitute the vast majority of the passengers that serve that particular corridor. Now that Lagos is putting in the red line, we then persuaded them to put in a station at Agbado, which is just within the Ogun State boundary. And Ogun State itself, the state itself is now planning to develop its own station at Ijoko and at Kajola Ifo. Basically to cater for all the people around Ota, Agbado, Ifo, the vast majority of whom travel into Lagos every day for their daily bread, for employment purposes and so on. And then sometime during the day, they also reverse back into these dormitory towns. So that's what we're trying to do with Red Line. There are several lines, railway lines, urban metro lines planned by Lagos, within Lagos, but also extending into Ogun State. The Blue Line is another one, which they are developing between Marina and Lokokomaiko. And we're working with them to extend that to Agbara. Another line in the plans of both states is the Purple Line, which is also traveling from the center of Lagos to Moweba for Redeem area. Okay. That's another futuristic plan. Okay. And we expect that that particular one, at some point, will be extended to the Abeokuta Airport in the April access. So, again, this speaks to the multimodal dimension of the transportation plan that we have for Ogun State, and in particular addressing these peculiar needs of those parts of Ogun State that are bounding to Lagos, highly densely populated areas with people moving in and out of Lagos frequently from day to day.
Now let's get to the cargo. How far? What's the progress report? How far?
Well, the airport, the infrastructure construction to enable a functional airport to take off is almost completed. We have the promise of His Excellency that by the end of this year, by the grace of Almighty God, the infrastructure, the runways, the control towers, warehouses necessary to ensure that the airport can function as a cargo airport will be completed. The government is in discussion with various operators and the regulators as well to ensure that necessary approvals are in place, and we have a solid team in place to actually manage the operations of the airport.
But would that still be under the purview of your ministry, or?
No, the airport is a government project. Okay. It's a multidisciplinary, multidimensional project. Okay. My ministry is involved, the Ministry of Works and Infrastructure is involved, Ministry of Urban Planning, Fiscal Planning and Urban Development are involved, the Ministry of Environment is involved, the Governor's Office, of course, is involved, the security team and agencies are all involved. It's a big project. And it's not just one that is assigned to one particular, it's a multi-dimensional, multi-sectoral activity.
Someone may be thinking, what's in it for the common man in the state?
In the airport?
Yeah, the agri-cargo airport.
Jobs, jobs, jobs. Employment, employment, employment. The reason for the airport is simple. It's basically to drive economic growth across Ogun State. It's an agri-cargo airport. Why? Because agriculture, of course, is a significant proportion of the economy of the state. Any investment that promotes further development and growth in agriculture can only help to increase economic activity in that area. And it's jobs, and jobs. So with more jobs comes increased tax revenues to the government, and therefore the government then has further opportunity to take such revenues to invest in other parts of the state, in other sectors of the state. But the only reason we're doing all this is it's not what I call a show project.
Okay.
It's basically an economically driven intervention.
And with the pace of work, will it be ready for flights that take off and landing by the end of this year?
Inshallah, yes, it will be. The reports that we are seeing, we are hearing, we've undertaken several visits to the site. The contractors are working day and night to ensure that they meet His Excellency's deadline. And that by the end of this year, a functional airport must be there. And I stress the word functional.
All right. From what you have laid down here, I don't envy you at all, Honorable Commissioner, because it's quite massive.
Sure.
And some of even the terrain, we have not entered it before. Do you see your ministry fully prepared, to handle
all of this? Very important question. As I said at the beginning of this program, we're very new. The ministry was established maybe about 2 years or so ago. So in addition to speaking to and working towards delivering the government's agenda, at the same time, we've had to build up a ministry, to build up capacity within the ministry to be able to deliver on the tasks that have been set. We have, and there are several things that the ministry requires for us to be able to do that. First, we need to put in place a law that is going to govern the sector. In that law will be the various institutions that necessary to support the ministry's activities. The ministry itself is a policy-making ministry. We're involved in mobilizing resources to the sector. The ministry's role is also to monitor the performance of the sector insofar as it's contributing to the economy of the state. And as I said at the beginning also, we're a regulating authority. But we also need implementing agencies within the ministry. Examples, of course, are TRACE. We have TRACE. So TRACE, as an organization, implements the ministry's policies on enforcement and regulation generally. We have the Parks and Garages Development Authority, and they speak to the ministry's policies as it affects parks and garages, which, by the way, we are trying to improve from parks and garages to terminals and stations. That's the direction in which we want to go there. But there are also other agencies and authorities required by the ministry or by the sector to implement things like the railway we've been speaking about, the water transportation opportunities we've been referring to, the eventual management of the Abeokuta airport that we've mentioned. So all of those institutions are ahead of us. They're not there yet, but there's a roadmap towards getting there.
Well, but what about water transportation? I know that's also part of the master plan.
Yes, it is. Water transportation is an interesting one. There are parts of Ogun State where our citizens rely on water transportation. So in the transportation planning, by the way, we look at the needs of current users of transportation systems, and then we also then project forward and look at the future need of potential users. For water transportation in particular, there are specific communities within Ogun State now who are heavily reliant on transport as a mode of transportation. And our priority for them is for them to have access to safe ways of mobility in their own areas, particularly the eastern part of the state, around the Ijebu East, for example, the Wopu area. There are people who use it to move from one village to the other, and there are some also who conduct commercial trips into Lagos and back. So we have a plan, of course, to ensure that those services are safe. But beyond that, there are parts of the state, eastern part of the state, as well as even the western part, in the Pokia area towards Badagry, where there are tourism opportunities that some investors have brought to our attention. That ahead of a wider, dense road network to these places, the water bodies that connect Lagos, for example, to the east are excellent opportunities for us to convey visitors there and back, insofar as a safe environment can be established. So we can't avoid the issue of security at the minute, as to how that might affect the use of those waterways. But it's certainly a feature of the Transport Master Plan.
All right, and then of course, when you were talking about tourism, I was thinking about boat regalia and stuff, and making the environment so lively. And Honorable Commissioner, we want to thank you very much for being part of our program this morning to look at the multimodal transportation plan for Ogun State. I think, well, now, can we call it a success story?
A work in progress.
A work in progress.
If you compare, look, you might say I'm biased, but if you compare the achievements in the transport sector in Ogun State, road infrastructure, agricultural airport development, the plans for Agbado, which you mentioned, the pilot scheme in Abeokuta, and you compare this to what has happened since the establishment of Ogun State, I will call it a resounding success. Okay. But the hopes and ambition of this governor is far beyond what we have done today. Okay, which is why, in fact, he's put his hat in the ring again to come back to complete the work that he started a few years ago. And we are hoping that the people of Ogun State will offer him the opportunity to do so, because he has a grand plan, a grand vision. Certainly for the transport sector, I can speak to that, because that's my ministry. So it is work in progress, and I hope the people of Ogun State sees it in their wisdom to offer him the opportunity to come back and complete this job, so that what needs to be done is actually done to the satisfaction of his own vision and the people of Ogun State.
All right, we want to thank you very much, Honorable Commissioner for Transportation.
Thank you, sir.
Engineer Gbenga Dairo. We wish you well.
Thank you.
And we hope that by the next time you come, we will have reports of flights across our airwaves. So that's about the end of that for this segment. We're still on New Dawn. We'll be back after this time out to look at another issue. Stay with us.
In May 29, 2019, we have been very clear with the vision. We distill this vision into our developmental pillars, our 5 developmental pillars, which we call Ishaya.
No government can be considered impactful without placing utmost priority on human-oriented programs and policies. Ishaya Update is a program put together to bring to you the updates of Governor Dapo Abiodun's developmental pillar as it's cut across all the sectors of the state economy.
How well do you know your business environment?
Division of works in that system, whereby we have finance department who can monitor.
It has been observed in Nigeria that it is producer or seller that dictate the price, the quantity, and the quality.
Which area of the economy are you interested in exploring?
As a CEO, as a chairman of the organization, if you're not serving your customers directly, somebody else is in your organization. That brings us to internal customers and external customers.
The Profit Point Business Show on OGTV will take care of all you need to know to grow. to expand as well as to sustain your business. The profit point, a leverage to be business-wise.